Well, I think there's a range of things that you might call social toxins that make it difficult, maybe in some ways more difficult than it used to be. There may be ways in which it's easier. For example, the 1950s when I was a child was a time of obliviousness. And what parent in the 50s had to answer a question from their child like, "Mom, what's this about the oral office that the president is engaged in? And what are these stained dresses about?" President Eisenhower was the president. As a child, we didn't know about his sexual life. It was not part of the public forum, and so parents didn't have to deal with that, whereas now you do. The sort of ability of parents to control access to information that changed so fundamentally with the introduction of television first, and of course now with the internet and the nature of television, it's startlingly different. In the 50s, turn on the television, what's the worst that a child could see? Today, of course, there's nothing a child can't see. One evidence is in the field of child sexual abuse. People used to be able to say if you saw a young child who had precocious knowledge of sex, that was a warning sign they'd been sexually abused. Doesn't work anymore, because now they could just be watching cable TV. So I think that challenge, the complexity of the task, the need to deal with difficult information has gotten much, much greater. I think that's certainly one. I think secondly, the increase in economic inequality in the society poses a big challenge to parents. It's empirically very clear that inequality has increased. The United States has more inequality than most Western democratic modernized societies, and that constantly leads to this comparison, why don't we have, or why can't we get? There was a time when both there was less inequality and it was more invisible. You didn't know. And of course that's tied into the general sort of materialistic shift, that the money it takes to be a normal kid now, the income you have to generate for your kid to be normal, you have to pay for a cell phone and cable TV and designer jeans and designer shoes and on, without even getting into sort of upper middle class affluence. Just the basics are so demanding that it puts so much pressure, and then in turn that pressure leads to anger and exhaustion on the part of parents, as well as this sort of grim sense of deprivation on the part of children. I once interviewed a boy, and he said, "When you came up, did you come up poor or regular?" And boy, that really captures it, that to feel irregular leads to shame and to rage and to humiliation, and all of that is magnified, and parents have to deal with that. The hypersexualization of childhood and early adolescence. Again, people have to manage, not only are girls achieving puberty earlier, but the visual borders between childhood and adolescence have eroded to the point where lots of young girls are wearing clothes that are very sexy, very grown-up looking, and their parents have to navigate that, because once one child has it, then another child wants it, and they want the makeup. And this is assuming the parents have good intentions to start with. I think all of those, the complexity of the task has just increased so dramatically, but the underlying needs are probably unchanged in many ways. The need for acceptance and an intact structure of authority and character education and all those sorts of things, but they become harder in this sort of toxic environment. With high school kids, one example I would point to is research in the 1950s, early 60s showed that kids do better in small high schools than big high schools, particularly kids who are somewhat at risk. And the finding was that when a high school got bigger than about 500 students, grades 9 through 12, it crosses a threshold into bigness, and the dropout rate for marginal students increases, and the delinquency rate increases, and the alienation increases. Well, in 1955, the average size of America's high schools was 500. By 1975, it was 1,500. So there's this accumulation of challenges. My kids are now grown, and I'm grateful for that in a sense. I didn't have to have the skill of managing their internet access when my kids were little. Now that would be an important requisite for the job.